I had seen the signs for months, but I had ignored them. Maybe because I didn't want to believe it. Maybe because the alternative, admitting that the woman I shared a life with was making a fool out of me, was too humiliating to face. But there was a moment, a single defining moment, where all the doubts, all the whispers in my head crystallized into cold, undeniable certainty. It was a Wednesday. Nothing special about it. Just another ordinary evening. I was in the kitchen, making coffee after a long day at work, when I heard her phone vibrate on the counter. Not just one message. 3, 4, 5. A rapid series of texts, insistent, urgent. I glanced over, not intending to snoop, but my eyes caught a name that didn't belong there. Tyler. She had never mentioned a Tyler. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But something about the way she had been lately, the way she'd started dressing up for errands, the way she always angled her phone away from me, the way she laughed too hard at nothing when she was texting, made my hand move before I could stop it. The messages were short. Can't wait. Same spot. You're unbelievable. A winking emoji. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. It could be innocent. Maybe a coworker. Maybe an inside joke. Maybe her voice cut through my thoughts like a knife. What the hell do you think you're doing? I turned. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, a carefully neutral expression on her face. But her eyes weren't neutral at all. They were calculating. Measuring. Already deciding how she was going to play this. I held up the phone. Who's Tyler? Her reaction was so smooth, so rehearsed, that I almost doubted what I had just read. She snatched the phone out of my hand with a scoff. Jesus, Mike? Are we really doing this? You're checking my messages now. Answer the question. She rolled her eyes, tossing the phone onto the counter like it was nothing. He's just a friend. You know, some people actually have those. Just a friend, I repeated, my voice flat. And you meet him at the same spot? A flicker of something crossed her face, annoyance, not guilt. God, you're exhausting. She turned away, opening the fridge like the conversation was already over. Do you seriously have nothing better to do than police my texts? This is why I don't tell you things. Because you always cut the crap. That got her attention. She slammed the fridge door shut and whirled on me. Oh, I'm sorry, do you think you're some kind of detective now? Newsflash, Mike, not everything is about you. I don't have to explain myself every time a guy texts me. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. So if I call him right now, he'll back that up? The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. For the first time, she hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough. Then, like flipping a switch, she scoffed and shook her head. Unbelievable. You know what? Go ahead. Call him. Stalk my messages. Do whatever makes you feel better. Since clearly, your own insecurities are more important than trusting your wife. It was a masterful deflection. A trap, really. If I kept pushing, I'd be the paranoid husband, the control freak, the jealous loser who couldn't handle his wife having male friends. But if I dropped it, if I let it go, she'd walk away with that same smug confidence I'd been seeing for weeks now. The kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you're getting away with something. I let the moment hang between us, watching her. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't panicked. She was angry, not because she'd been caught, but because I had dared to catch her. That was when I knew. She wasn't just lying. She had been lying for a long time. And she wasn't sorry. She loved cheating on me. Right in front of my eyes. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't some insecure husband imagining things. I just needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. That night after she left, I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, my mind racing. I wasn't even angry yet. I was focused. I needed to know who, where, how far this had gone. If she was capable of looking me in the eyes and lying so easily, what else had she been doing? I grabbed my phone and pulled up her location. A while back, she'd insisted we share our locations for safety. Funny how that worked out. She'd said she was going to a new bar downtown with her friends. But her dot wasn't moving downtown. It was sitting completely still at a hotel 10 minutes away. That was it. That was my answer. I sat there, gripping my phone, my chest rising and falling too fast. I should have felt shattered. I should have felt my world crumbling. Instead, I felt something else entirely. I smiled. Because now it was my turn to play. I grabbed my keys, got in my car and started driving. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do when I got there. Bust down the door? Walk in like I was supposed to be there? Call her? No. Too easy. Too predictable. She expected me to sit at home like a loyal, obedient idiot. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The parking lot was full, but I spotted her car instantly. She always parked in reverse because she said it made for a faster getaway. Guess she'd gotten used to sneaking around. I pulled up a few rows behind it just out of sight and sat there, waiting. The minutes crawled by. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I watched the entrance, expecting to see her walk out, expecting the worst. But then her name lit up my phone. She was calling me. I took a slow breath and answered, keeping my voice normal. Hey. Hey, babe, she said, her voice light, too light. What are you up to? I stared at the hotel. Not much. Just watching TV? You. There was a pause. A hesitation so small most people wouldn't notice it. But I did. Still at the bar, she lied. It's pretty packed. Probably gonna be late. I wanted to laugh. Not out of humor, out of sheer disbelief. She was lying to me while sitting in a hotel room with someone else. Without a care in the world. I glanced at her car again. Yeah? Which bar was it again? Another tiny pause. Then a Reverie. That new rooftop one. Reverie. Cute. It was all the way downtown. Nowhere near this place. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to keep my voice even. Sounds fun. Who all is there? Oh, you know. The usual girls. Jenna, Liv, Sarah, she was naming names. Building the lie. Cementing it. I could almost picture her sitting on a hotel bed, one hand playing with her hair while the other was probably tangled with someone else's. I should have hung up. I should have said something. But instead, I let her keep talking. Let her spin her web of lies, let her think she had me fooled. And when she finally said, love you, see you later, I smiled. Yeah, I said. See you later. I hung up and stepped out of the car. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. If anything, I felt calm. Too calm. Like my brain had accepted reality and was operating on pure, cold logic now. She was here. Right now. With him. Lying straight to my face without even flinching. I walked across the parking lot, scanning the building. Standard mid-tier hotel. 3 floors. Rooms with those big, sliding windows covered by cheap curtains. I took my time, looking for any sign, lights on, movement, anything that could give her away. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I knew I'd find it. I passed the lobby entrance, keeping my head down. There was a guy at the front desk, but he wasn't paying attention. Good. I slipped around the side of the building instead, scanning the windows. The hotel wasn't fully booked. Some rooms were dark. But on the 2nd floor, 3rd window from the end, the curtains weren't completely closed. There was a gap, and through that gap I saw it. A man's jacket tossed over a chair. I froze. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed it down. Focus. I took a few steps back and pulled out my phone. Opened my camera. Zoomed in. 2 glasses on the nightstand. A purse, her purse, on the bed. And then, just as I was about to lower the phone, movement. A shadow passed by the window. And then, just for a split second, the curtain shifted, and I saw her. My wife. Standing in that hotel room. Wearing a dress I bought her. Holding a drink in one hand, her phone in the other, the same phone she had just called me from. I took the picture. I don't even know why. Maybe because I needed something tangible. Something that proved this was real and not just some nightmare I was going to wake up from. I stepped back into the shadows, my pulse steady. I could walk in there right now. Demand answers. Make a scene. But that's what she would expect. That's what cheaters always expect. Some big, emotional meltdown so they can flip the script, turn it around on you. Not this time. I walked back to my car, got in, and sat there, thinking, planning, and then, an idea. Terrible, brilliant idea. I opened our shared banking app and checked our accounts. She had a separate one for personal spending, but our joint account, the one we used for bills, groceries, trips, that one I had full control over. I transferred everything out, every last cent. Then I checked our shared calendar. She had a hair appointment tomorrow, a nail appointment the next day, dinner plans with the girls on Friday. I canceled all of them. Next, I went to our streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. All in my name. I changed every password. Finally, I went into her email. The one she used for everything: shopping, newsletters, even her work schedule. I reset the password and locked her out. It was petty. It was childish. And it felt so damn good. I wasn't done. Not even close. But this? This was just the beginning. The moment stretched, long and suffocating. She stood frozen in the doorway, her face drained of color, while the man behind her, her lover, her secret, her filth, didn't even flinch. He leaned casually against the doorframe, a towel slung low around his waist, arms crossed over his chest like this was his home, like I was the intruder. I took my time, letting my gaze drift between the two of them. I wanted her to feel it. The weight of my silence. The sheer force of my presence. Finally, I tilted my head. Aren't you going to invite me in? My voice was calm. Too calm. I saw it register in her eyes, that flicker of unease. Mike, she tried again, stepping forward, reaching for me. I didn't move. Didn't let her touch me. She hesitated, then threw a glance over her shoulder at him like she wasn't sure how to play this. That was the most disgusting part. She was thinking. Calculating. Not breaking down in regret, not begging for forgiveness, just figuring out which version of herself would get her out of this. I turned my attention to the man behind her. What's your name? The bastard smirked. I felt something dark coil in my chest. He didn't even have the decency to pretend to be ashamed. Does it matter? He asked lazily, his voice dripping with arrogance. I almost laughed. He wasn't some mistake. He wasn't some stranger she'd regret. He was a choice. A deliberate, repeated choice. And I was done pretending. I looked back at her. How long? She swallowed. Mike, can we just how long? A pause. And then barely above a whisper, a year. A year. 12 months. 52 weeks of looking me in the eyes, kissing me goodnight, saying she loved me. All while sneaking off to hotels with this smug piece of garbage. Something in me snapped. I stepped forward, and for the first time she backed up. Not out of fear, out of guilt, out of exposure. She'd never seen me like this before, and that terrified her. I want you to do something for me, I said. My voice was steady, even as I felt the storm raging inside me. She nodded quickly. Anything. I leaned in, close enough to smell the remnants of his cologne on her skin. Close enough to make sure she wouldn't forget this moment. Pack your things. Her breath caught. Mike, please. You've got 5 minutes. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. And then, for the first time in a year, she finally realized. She'd lost. She didn't move. She just stood there, her lips slightly parted, blinking at me like I had just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Like she couldn't comprehend that the game was over. I held her gaze, steady and unwavering. Did I stutter? Her fingers curled into the edge of her robe, gripping it tighter around her body, as if that would somehow hide her sins. Mike, she tried, her voice softer now, calculated, like she thought she could talk her way out of this. Like she always did. Let's just go home and home? I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. Just exhaustion. Just disgust. You really think you still have a home with me? I saw the panic flicker in her eyes then. A small crack in that carefully constructed persona. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. But I wasn't done yet. I turned my attention back to the other man. He hadn't moved. Still leaning against the doorframe, watching this unfold with an infuriating look of amusement. You, I said, pointing at him. You knew she was married, didn't you? He shrugged. Shrugged. Like my marriage, asterisk, asterisk, my life, asterisk, asterisk, was some minor inconvenience. She never acted like she was. And that was it. That was the final confirmation I needed. I turned back to my wife, or rather, the woman I used to think was my wife. You have 4 minutes left. Her lips pressed together, her eyes darting between me and the man behind her. And then she did something I will never forget. She scoffed. Not a sob, not a look of regret, a scoff. Like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I was embarrassing her. She tilted her head, arms crossing over her chest. You're really doing this, huh? I exhaled slowly, forcing my hands to stay at my sides. You did this. I'm just finishing it. A bitter little laugh left her lips. Oh, come on, Mike. Don't act like you're some perfect husband. I raised a brow. Oh? Please. Enlighten me. She rolled her eyes. You were always so predictable. So safe. Always coming home at the same time, always sitting in the same damn chair, watching the same shows, asking the same boring questions. Jesus, Mike. Do you even realize how dull you became? I stared at her. I could feel something shifting inside me. Some final, irreversible break. Dull? I repeated. She threw her hands up. God, yes. You were just there all the time. Like some reliable little puppy. Just waiting for me to come home and throw you a bone. Meanwhile, I wanted more. I wanted excitement, I wanted passion, I laughed. And this time, it was real. Because I finally saw her for who she was. You wanted to feel powerful, I said, cutting through her rant like a blade. You wanted to get away with it. That's why you did it so close to home, why you never even bothered to hide it properly. You wanted to see how far you could push me before I broke. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. I let the silence stretch between us before speaking again. Time's up. Pack your things or I'll do it for you. She glared at me, waiting for me to crack, to give in. I didn't. And that's when she knew this time I wasn't bluffing. She didn't move right away. She just stood there like she was waiting for some kind of miracle, some last-second twist where I'd change my mind and let her get away with it. But there was no miracle. There was just me, standing in that doorway watching her realize that for the first time in our entire marriage, she wasn't in control. Her lips parted slightly and then she did what cheaters do best. She started lying. Mike, I swear it didn't mean anything. Her voice softened, dripping with false sincerity. It was just a stupid mistake. I tilted my head, amused. A year-long mistake? She swallowed hard. I know how it sounds, but no, I cut her off. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to stand here, half-dressed in another man's hotel room and tell me it didn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to risk everything. It meant enough for you to laugh in my face while sneaking off to be with him. I jerked my chin toward the man still standing behind her, arms crossed like this was some kind of spectator sport. Her eyes flicked toward him, and for the first time I saw something other than arrogance in her expression. Doubt. She had spent a year risking everything for this man, and yet he hadn't said a single word to defend her. She was starting to realize that she had backed the wrong horse. Good. You know what's funny? I continued, stepping further into the room. You thought you were playing me. Thought you had me wrapped around your finger. Thought you were so damn untouchable. But the whole time you were the one getting played. She frowned, her confidence slipping. What are you talking about? I pointed to the man behind her. Go ahead. Ask him if you were the only one. Something flickered across her face, something uncertain. She turned to him, expecting no, needing reassurance. And that's when he smirked. It was small, barely there, but I saw it. And more importantly, so did she. She took a step toward him. Tell him he's wrong. The man her lover, her big, exciting escape from her dull husband just shrugged. Shrugged. Her breath hitched. Wait. What? Now I was the one watching. Watching as her own betrayal came full circle. Watching as she finally understood what it felt like to be the fool. She took another step toward him, her voice more desperate now. So that's it? That's all you have to say? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like this conversation was nothing more than an inconvenience. Look, don't act surprised. You had a whole husband at home and you still couldn't stay loyal. Did you really think I was gonna be? And there it was. The final nail in the coffin. I saw it in her eyes, the way her world cracked, the way the reality of the situation finally sank in. She had lost everything. Me. Him. Her marriage. Her backup plan. She was alone. She turned back to me, her expression shattered, and for the first time that night she looked genuinely afraid. Because now? She had no idea what was coming next. She looked at me like she was finally seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. Not as the predictable, safe husband she had been stepping on for years. Not as the naive idiot who would forgive anything. Not as the backup plan waiting at home, ready to pick up the pieces. She looked at me and she saw a man who was done. Mike, she breathed, like my name alone would be enough to fix this. We can work through this. I laughed. Actually laughed. A low, bitter chuckle that came from somewhere deep in my chest. Work through this? I repeated. Are you out of your goddamn mind? She flinched as if my reaction was the most shocking thing in the world. As if she had actually convinced herself that she still had a chance to salvage this. You don't just get to cheat for a year, lie straight to my face, humiliate me, and then ask me to fix it. You don't get to drag me through the dirt and then act like we're on the same team. She shook her head frantically. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't care if you did. Silence. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? She hadn't just made a mistake. She had chosen to do this over and over again because she was so sure she'd never get caught. Because she thought she was smarter than me. Now she was standing here, her robe loose around her shoulders, looking lost. Looking like she had no idea how she ended up in this mess. But I did. She put herself here. I exhaled slowly, glancing at my watch. You're wasting time. Pack your things. Her face twisted, desperation creeping in. Mike, please. Just listen. I did listen, I cut in. For years I listened. When you told me I was overthinking. When you made me feel like a jealous idiot for noticing things. When you looked me in the eyes and swore you loved me while running off to hotel rooms with him. I gestured toward the man still standing there, watching us with an almost bored expression. The realization hit her like a brick. This wasn't the moment where she would convince me to stay. This wasn't the moment where she would cry and I would fold. This was the moment where she finally lost control. And she couldn't handle it. Her hands curled into fists. Fine, she snapped. You want to throw me out like trash? Go ahead. But don't sit there acting like you were some perfect husband. You were boring. You were predictable. I stepped forward, cutting off her little tantrum with nothing but my presence. She backed up a step, startled by the way I towered over her now. You really think this is about me not being exciting enough? I asked, my voice dangerously low. You really think this is about me at all? She hesitated, and I saw it, the crack in her ego. Because deep down she knew. This wasn't about me. This was about her. Her selfishness. Her entitlement. Her complete lack of respect for the man who had given her everything. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of her own betrayal settle in. Then I spoke, each word slow and deliberate. You made your bed. I gestured to the hotel room. Now lie in it. And with that I turned and walked out the door. I didn't look back. Because I didn't care anymore. The hotel hallway was dead silent as I walked away. No shouting, no footsteps chasing after me, just silence. I didn't need to turn around to know she was still standing in that doorway watching me leave, her mind scrambling for a way to pull me back in. But she wouldn't. Not this time. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and let the doors slide shut. As soon as I was alone, I exhaled slowly, deeply. Not because I was sad. Not because I regretted it. But because for the first time in years I felt free. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. 10 missed calls from her. I hadn't heard them ring, must have silenced it at some point. Didn't matter. I wasn't answering. As I walked through the lobby, the receptionist glanced up, probably recognizing me from earlier. If she had any suspicions about what just happened, she kept them to herself. Maybe she'd seen this before. Maybe men like me, men who walked in with one life and walked out with another, weren't so uncommon in places like this. I stepped out into the cool night air and headed for my car. The second I got inside, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I could go home. Pretend I didn't just stand face to face with the biggest lie of my life. Pretend I wasn't thinking about how many times she had stood in our house, smiled at me, kissed me, touched me while knowing she was betraying me. But I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out of the parking lot and started driving. No destination. No plan. Just me, the road, and the weight of a marriage that had already been dead long before tonight. I must have driven for hours. At some point, I ended up at an all-night diner, one of those old-school places with flickering neon signs and tired waitresses who'd seen it all. I slid into a booth, ordered a coffee I didn't really want, and sat there, staring at the scratched-up table. And that's when it really sank in. She was gone. Not physically, not yet. She was probably still at that hotel, trying to figure out how to spin this into something salvageable. But emotionally? Mentally? She was already out of my life. And I felt nothing but relief. No sadness. No grief. Just relief. I should have left her a long time ago. I knew that now. All those little moments, the dismissive way she talked to me, the way she never took responsibility for anything, the way she never once made me feel like I was enough, they had all been leading to this. She never loved me. Not really. She just loved knowing she had me. And now? She didn't. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. Her name. Again. I let it ring. Then, when it stopped, another message popped up. Mike, please? Just talk to me. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked her number. And just like that, she was gone. Blocking her number should have felt like the final step. The clean break. The moment I severed the last thread connecting me to the woman who had spent a year spitting on our marriage. But life doesn't wrap things up that neatly. Because the next morning, I woke up to pounding on my front door. Not a knock. Not a polite tap. Pounding. I already knew who it was before I even sat up. I could have ignored it. Let her stand outside in the cold, let her deal with the consequences of her actions alone. But no, that would be too easy. I got out of bed, walked to the door, and pulled it open. And there she was. Standing on my doorstep, the woman who had thrown everything away like it meant nothing. She looked rough. Her hair was messy, her eyes red like she had spent all night crying. She wasn't wearing the same robe from the hotel, no, she had changed. Tried to clean herself up. Tried to look like the woman I used to trust. Too late. Mike, she said, her voice already breaking. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. How'd you find your way home? Your boyfriend didn't give you a ride. She flinched. Good. Mike, please, she whispered. Can we talk? I tilted my head. What is there to talk about? Tears welled up in her eyes. Real or fake, I didn't care. She took a shaky breath. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But her voice caught and she wiped at her face, shoulders shaking. I can't lose you. Please. I should have felt something. Pain. Anger. Nostalgia. Anything. But I felt nothing. She had drained me completely. I studied her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until I saw the desperation creeping in. Let me guess, I said. He didn't want you either. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The weight of it hit her then. I saw it in her eyes. She had nowhere to go. She had spent a year tearing us apart for another man, and in the end, she was left with nothing. I almost laughed. Instead, I just sighed. You don't miss me. You miss what I gave you. Stability. Loyalty. A place to run to when things didn't go your way. She shook her head wildly. That's not true. I love you. I took a step forward, and for the first time in our entire marriage, she backed away from me. No, you don't, I said, my voice dangerously calm. If you loved me, you wouldn't have risked losing me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied every single night for a year. If you loved me, you wouldn't have looked me in the eyes while sleeping with someone else. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. Please, she whispered. Just give me one more chance. And that was when I smiled. Not out of happiness. Not out of kindness. Out of freedom. No, she sucked in a sharp breath like I had physically struck her. I kept my voice level, my tone firm. I deserve better than you. And you? You deserve exactly what you got. I stepped back, grip tightening on the door. Goodbye. And with that, I shut the door in her face. I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, listening to the silence on the other side. For a second, she didn't move. Didn't knock. Didn't cry. Nothing. And then a shaky breath. A sniffle. The slow shuffle of footsteps as she backed away. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. She was already gone. I exhaled, leaning my forehead against the door. I should have felt relief. Closure. Some grand moment of finality. Instead, I just felt done. Not broken. Not numb. Just done. I walked away from the door, heading into the kitchen. The house was too quiet. It was always quiet in the mornings, but today it felt different. Not empty. Peaceful. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the steam curling from the surface. A year. A whole year of my life. Gone. Stolen. Wasted. Or maybe not. Maybe this was exactly what I needed. A reset. A clean slate. A reminder that no matter how much you think you know someone, no matter how much time you invest in them, they can still betray you. And when they do, you don't chase them. You don't beg. You don't hold on. You let them destroy themselves. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old messages. The ones where she lied. The ones where she swore she loved me. The ones where she promised she'd always be honest. All meaningless now. One by one, I deleted them. I removed her from everything: social media, shared accounts, bank access. I didn't just erase her number. I erased her. And with each tap of my finger, the weight in my chest grew lighter. By the time I was finished, I was free. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because she thought she was playing me. Thought she was getting away with it. Thought she was too smart, too careful, too untouchable. But in the end, she lost everything. And me? I won.